Remowitz, generational leader, pioneer of the Judean frontier, and we've come here today with a very important message because, as you know, the whole coronavirus epidemic has completely infected the entire world, and in Israel there's a lot of unique things going on. It's very ominous, and I'm just going to give you a quick update. For example, right now we have 120 confirmed cases of coronavirus. Thank God, no deaths. Israel has over 100,000 people in self-quarantine. Self-quarantine doesn't necessarily mean you're in a compound in a hospital somewhere, but you have to stay at your house for 2 weeks. All schools have been shut down until Pesach, which is crazy. All the parents are completely going nuts. Concerts, outdoor events, all sorts of activities, Purim parades, even the Yom Ha'atzmaut, Israel Independence Day fair, has been canceled from audiences. There is just a rabbinic decree not to go to the Kotel, in the Arab side of Israel. I just read that in the Israeli Arab village of Tira, a lot of these Israeli Arabs are coming back to Israel, and they're just flouting the quarantine regulations, and they're just walking around freely in their villages. Bethlehem, there's a serious outbreak. Many of the Arabs in Judea and Samaria are not being allowed to come into the Jewish areas of Judea and Samaria. Which is good for us, because also a lot of these anarchists who are coming from abroad and Europeans, there hasn't been any riots, if you've noticed. There's no mass gatherings of riots. We're entering a very new reality, and most of all is that no one's traveling. Now, a lot of people don't realize two things. First of all, Israel is a lot of its economy is based on tourism. I think it's the only country in the world where you have to be certified by the government to be a tour guide, and tour operators and tour guides are just out of work. It's decimating the tourism industry. Ben Gurion Airport is a ghost town. Now, a lot of people also don't realize that Israel is a very big travel culture, meaning traveling, just leaving Israel is almost like a rite of passage. Everyone who finishes the army, it's almost like the next step is to travel to the east or to travel to South America. No one's doing that. No one's going out of Israel. It's very difficult to come into Israel. No one wants to travel because they know if they do come back to Israel, they'll have to self-quarantine for 2 weeks. And
they're not only not leaving the country, they're not leaving their own homes. There was just a famous rabbi here in Israel that said that because Netanyahu said there shouldn't be any synagogues over 100 people praying together. But why? That seems like an arbitrary number. And this rabbi said there should be no minyanim, no groups of over 10 men coming together to pray. There's not an obligation to pray in groups anymore. We should be praying in our own homes. So it's a time of tremendous isolation on a personal, on a national, on an international level.
Yeah, and you can really feel it. It's in the air, meaning I do believe in the end of days, and there's a real apocalyptic feel going on in Israel right now. It's just places where there's supposed to be traffic, there's no traffic. Kids are in the streets when they're supposed to be in school. Cafes empty. Tourists nowhere to be seen. We're entering a very new reality, and the thing that I think worries us probably more than anything is the ability of Jewish people worldwide to make it to Israel. And I saw something interesting. He said if you come to Israel now, you actually still have it pretty good. All you have to do is self-quarantine for 2 weeks. But an article that I was reading, Rabbi Kahana, not Meir Kahana, but his brother, Nachman Kahana, I think his name is,
yes.
He said, God always sends you hints. He kind of sends you, he lets you dip your toe in the water. So if you think it's hard to come to Israel now, or inconvenient to come to Israel now, just wait and see what's to come. This is just a sneak preview. And Ari, you're a big Aliyah advocate with the long track record, and I just wanted to kind of get you to weigh in and tell me if you agree or how you see things kind of playing out, or what people should need to realize that they might not know.
So I saw someone post on Facebook saying, my rabbi said that this coronavirus is happening because people are attributing reasons to why disasters occur. Right? So there's it's funny, but it's important to remember that our mind is not God's mind, and we don't know the reason that he does things in a definitive way. However, the events of this world are communications to us. God is communicating to us by what happens in our lives. I know on a personal level, if I get a cold sore on my lip, I start thinking, have I been speaking Lashon Hara? Have I been slandering? Have I been not speaking well? If I sprain my ankle, have I been running to do things I shouldn't be doing? If I have a migraine or an eye infection, have I been looking at things I shouldn't be looking at? Meaning that God does communicate to us in this way, and we also know he communicates to the world as attribute for attribute. Meaning that, you know, Avshalom, King David's son, that was very haughty and arrogant and loved his appearance and you know, would brush his hair all the time. His hair was hung in a tree and he was killed because of his hair. Haman was hung on the very gallows that he put up. Meaning that there's a certain concept that God is speaking to us through the event. So I think it's imperative for us to humbly look within and seek to understand what the message could be for us on a national level, on a personal level, and on an international level. And I mean on an international level because this is not about the Jewish people. This is about all of mankind. And one of the things that I think is important to remember is that possibly God is telling us that we're just so vulnerable. We have become very arrogant as mankind, as a species. And, you know, we're in control of technology. We're in control of our environment around us. And then something so small and invisible brings the entire world to our knees. Mashpil Geim, God brings down the haughty. And so I think that's one thing that's happening. And also the interconnection of all of us as human beings, as mankind. You said, David, that there's no riots going on. But I don't know if you've seen, just 2 days ago on Purim, there was a little boy that was wearing his Purim costume, and Arabs surrounded his car and threw a massive stone, cracking his skull open. Yesterday, a driver in the Samaria, they opened fire on his vehicle.
Yeah, but that's not a riot.
No, it's not a riot. But the point is that there is still violence, and I have to say my intuition. I wasn't
implying that there wasn't.
No, my intuition was one of just like a very visceral anger. Like, can we not just stop this for a second? For a second, can you not put away your irrational, overwhelming hatred of the Jewish people for a second and just realize that we're sick as a species, as mankind? And so I think that that's one of the messages. But something that's actually keeping me up at night is American Jewry. Really global Jewry, but the vast majority of diaspora Jewry, of exile Jewry, is in America. Now, I've been nervous about this for a while. There were a lot of anti-Semitic attacks. And I came out and I said in a conversation with a very prominent American rabbi that I think it's really important that the leadership in America sounds the alarm, blows the shofar, let's say, and says it's time to return home. That if there's some sort of black swan, if there's some sort of event, unforeseen event, it's not the coronavirus that I think is so dangerous. It's the economic shutdown, the economic downturn that is the real danger here. It's not the virus itself. And when I look at America, the societal fabric holding that country together has never been so worn and tattered and coming apart at the seams. And when that happens and there's an economic downturn, I don't think they're necessarily going to turn on the Jews, but I do think that they're going to turn on each other. They're going to turn on each other, and America is going to go through very, very difficult times. And when that happens, it's always amplified the effects for the Jewish people. And I've been always concerned and nervous. The gates are going to close. You're not always going to have the opportunity to make Aliyah. And now it's happening. Right now, a Jew from America, it's not easy, borderline impossible, to come back to Israel. And I would not want to be on the other side of the ocean with the gates shut and Jews in America locked in. Okay, that to me is a very, very scary proposition.
So there's a few things, actually. It's very interesting you say that because, well, first of all, I want to talk a little bit about changing realities and adapting to a changed reality. Meaning when Bnei Israel was in Egypt, they had a very good, prosperous life. All of a sudden,
we have to try to talk like this, so we're not talking in each other's face, just in case one of us has it. All right, go ahead.
So, and if one of us does, it's probably you. anyways, so in Egypt, Bnei Israel, they had a great life, and all of a sudden one day, bam, they're slaves. And if you want to go,
It wasn't one day, bam. It was a slow turning
No,
of
there
events.
was a new
It was gradual.
pharaoh.
A new pharaoh, but it was
And he
gradual.
enslaved them.
I mean, okay, but it wasn't like that. There was a gradual
Okay.
series of decrees that were stripping away until all of a sudden that's where they found themselves.
So right. So
There's an important distinction to make.
okay, and also in Germany, not too long ago, Jews were very prosperous, and I hesitate to say, bam, they find themselves in concentration camps. And you know, I always wonder how come there wasn't a mass rebellion amongst the Jewish people once they realized that they were going from living in mansions to getting rounded up into cattle cars. Like, where was the rebellion? And I realize that when you're kind of stuck in your routine and you don't take time to step back and see the big picture and try to figure out what the next step is on a societal level, and you don't make any attempt to read the writing that's on the wall, you suddenly find yourself in a new reality that you don't really know how to deal with, and you haven't fully internalized. And I think that's kind of what's happening now, meaning the idea that a Jew cannot get on a plane and fly to Israel is crazy. It's like so far-fetched. It's the weirdest thing. And if you're considering Aliyah, but you're holding out until all lights are green, then and all of a sudden this happens, and a lot of people I feel like are still in denial, and they're still saying, yeah, this will blow over. This will blow over. The planes are still. I mean, you can still come, and you'll have to be in quarantine for 2 weeks, but you can still make it. And I think one lesson is important to understand is that, like you said before, reality can change so quickly, and if you don't adapt, and if you don't dig deep and realize what's going on, what's really going on, you could find yourself in the same position, chas v'chalila, that the Jews in Europe did, 70 years ago, or that the Jews in Egypt did. You know, the Jews didn't rebel when they found themselves going from a life of prosperity into slavery. I don't know if you have any thoughts on that.
No, I do. I mean, when you look back at World War II, the Jews in Germany were more assimilated than any Jews have been throughout world history. They were in the arts and the sciences, and the intermarriage was at nearly 70% from the statistics I've read in pre-Holocaust Germany. A nation like that, the natural order of things is that they're just a hop, skip, and a jump away from complete absorption, assimilation, and disappearing. But it's exactly when we're at that level of assimilation that there's a divine reflex that comes out and says, no, not you. Nations may meld into nations, but you, the nation of Israel, is a unique nation. You're my nation, and you will not disappear, and you will not be erased. And so what happens is there's this national reflex of hatred that turns against the Jewish people. And I think that there is a real danger. Jabotinsky in pre-Holocaust Germany, he was preaching to the Jews and saying, I'm telling you, the gates are going to shut. You are a crown and the jewel of world Jewry, but please, I'm begging you, do not stay here. There's no future for you. There's only death. And they mocked him, and they hated him, and they jeered at him, and they were too busy with the day-to-day of their lives to think about the macro, the big moves that must be made. And right now, we are all sensing, the whole world is anxious and afraid and confused, and we know that things are happening. And if you don't see the hand of God in this, I'm not telling you that I know what the hand of God is in this, but there is a hand of God in this for sure. And I believe that we're in for great times, but also very turbulent and scary times. So wherever you are in the world, this is a time to dig deep, to build up your faith on a personal level. I always have like piles of books that I want to plow through. I've put them all to the side, and I've taken out the Tanakh, and I'm just reading through the prophets. And because as I'm going through, I'm realizing that these are the times that we are supposed to read these prophecies. They were written for us during these times. The sages of Israel said that in the days of Messiah, in the birth pangs of Messiah, it's going to be so scary, let us not be there for those times. And these times we're approaching, those are the times that we really need to solidify and concretize our faith and understand that God is with us. And we need to make bold moves that are a reflection of the understanding that Hashem is with us, and we need to take that first step.
Well, I wanted to. That's really fascinating. I wanted to actually expound on that point, because what's actually happened was there was this big outbreak of coronavirus in a Jewish community in New Rochelle, New York. You hear about it? They had like the National Guard, I guess, closed down on it. So here's the thing. I think there's a lot more coronavirus in America that's being reported. It's just it's the way the health system in America is set up. It's very expensive to actually get checked. So who gets checked? The Jewish people, because let's face it, Jewish people are more on the health conscious side, more on, they're much more concerned and aware of health issues.
Hypochondria is a Jewish issue.
All right, let's not get too deep into the stereotypes, but you get the point. So here you have, all of a sudden, there's an outbreak in the Jewish community. You don't think the anti-Semites are pouncing on this like white on rice? They are. I've seen what they're saying on social media, and when this compounds with the financial crash, like you were talking about, I think it's a very important point, because we all know what's going on with the stock market. It dropped like 1,500 points, and it doesn't, and that seems to be just the beginning. Who do you think the world blames when this is precisely what happened in Germany? Things were fine. All of a sudden, they went into a depression, and so one guy got up and blamed the Jews, and everyone rallied behind them. Now, what's interesting is something else I wanted to say. A couple months ago, there was, I guess it's still going on, it's not reported as much, in New York City, a lot of Jewish people were getting jumped and attacked and beaten up and spit and basically mugged in New York City. And you were kind of saying now's the time to come home. And I was a little, I'm very careful. I try to be more careful about how I sound the alarm on Aliyah, meaning a part of me thinks, okay, New York City is dangerous. Yes, Jews have to get out of New York City. But if you hunker down in Colorado in like a place with a bunch of guns and a lot of land, you could be safe, and, you could still be in America and enjoy all the things America has to offer. But now, and you tell me what you think. Now I'm like, okay, let's say you're safe in America. Let's say you go to the mountains, you buy your ranch, you get your guns, you're safe, you're not worried about the government seizing your property or anti-Semites coming because you have all the guns and protection you need. But if you can't get to Israel, you're missing out on something huge that's about to happen. And this is something I think a lot of us are feeling. There's the end of days are upon us. And I think a lot of us who are paying attention to that realize that. Like every rabbi, I haven't seen one serious rabbi who hasn't said that we're not in the Messianic era. And I think we all realize it's all going to go down right here in Israel. And if you're Jewish and you miss out, let's say you're safe in America. I don't even want to talk about the safety versus not safe, the security issue. I just want to talk about you as a Jewish person missing out on the most massive game-changing event in all of Jewish history, and you're not in Israel where it's all going to go down. I mean, I don't know what's worse, being persecuted as a Jew or missing out on that incredible time.
So I think that's a good point. I try to be cautious with this talk about the end of days is upon us, because what does that mean? The end of days is upon us. It sounds very eschatological. It sounds like you're some guy standing on a street corner in Manhattan with a cardboard sign, the end of days is near. It sounds crazy.
Well, I'm not saying it's going to happen tomorrow. But
No,
I'm
but
saying
what does
there's
that even mean, the end
air.
of days? What does that even mean? I think
What
the
does
point,
it mean? It means
no,
we're in the
point,
Messianic era.
Okay, well, it's not the end of days. In a lot of ways, that's the beginning of days. Okay, that's the beginning of a new era. But I don't even think we need to get as abstractly theological as that. I think the point that you're making really is valid and is true on itself, in its own right. That the joy and the vitality and the purpose and the mission of living a Jewish life in the Jewish state, in the state of Israel, I personally, with this coronavirus happening all around us, I feel safer than we could ever be anywhere in the entire world.
So I want to actually talk a little bit about that. I forgot to talk about. Israel is taking the most aggressive measures against. They were the first to take the most aggressive measures against the coronavirus. They were the first to cut off incoming flights from the list of countries that are most at high risk. They were the quickest to quarantine. I would say of all the countries in the world, Israel has it most under control. Italy right now is jealous of how Israel I thought they were overreacting, but now I'm sticking my foot in my mouth because Israel textbook did everything right, everything they could do within their capacity to fight this thing, and thank God, unlike Italy, Israel's hospitals are not overwhelmed by coronavirus patients. They have it under control. In Italy, they're actually deciding who's going to live and who's going to die. That's a terrible decision any doctor should have to make.
They have no choice.
Right. And thank God that hasn't happened in Israel. And, I think this is finally the one time where the Jews being hypochondriacs actually pays off. So,
I mean, the bubonic plague, Jews were blamed for because they weren't getting it. And why? Because before hand washing was a cool thing in the world to do, Jews were doing it because of our ritual hand washing before we ate.
Which is in the 6th Parsha, by the way. So, anyways, and not only that, Israel is on the forefront of actually fighting this coronavirus. They're the ones who are trying to come up with the vaccine, and they're actually put together a task force of doctors to advise the rest of the world on how to handle it. I mean, Israel is really a light unto the nations when it comes to combating this thing. So, that's something else that people need to understand, that the coronavirus could theoretically end here, and I think I think Israel in that sense is safer than America, because in America, you don't know who has coronavirus. People aren't getting tested. My brother-in-law told me that in Canada, Trudeau is still allowing flights into China. I mean, it's nuts. Trudeau's wife gets coronavirus.
Right.
And,
I think it's also worth noting, and this is a very dangerous line of thinking, so I'm saying so very humbly, but just interesting to note the way that this started from China, which is a spiritually and morally bankrupt country that is flagrantly violating human rights to their own citizens and around the world, to the Iranian government. Iran, they were the first actual government that really contracted the virus, which is now spread, they say, to
everywhere.
No, to the head of Hezbollah.
Right. There's reports that Nasrallah has coronavirus.
Hassan Nasrallah has coronavirus.
The vice president of Iran got coronavirus, and tens of ministers of parliament died from coronavirus. And the death rate in Iran is higher than any other country, including outside of China, I believe. And actually, the rate in Iran is higher. The total body count in China is higher. China is somewhat stabilizing it. And Italy, of course.
And Rome. Italy, which is Rome, which destroyed the temple. And it was interesting that you sent me a link, David. This man named Yekutiel Ben Yaakov.
Yeah.
He sent a very interesting perspective on that. And he was referencing back to the times of King David, when there was a plague and 70,000 Israelites died. And it was only when King David, he says, according to the Midrash, when King David said, this is where we're going to start building the temple, this is how we're going to move forward with building the temple, this is what's going to be, that the plague stopped. That that this plague, this man believes that it's connected to the building of the temple.
Yeah, a lot of rabbis are saying that, because corona means crown, and the crown jewel of Hashem is, of course, the Temple Mount in his temple. So if I can just shift gears before...
No, but there's one last thing I wanted to say that was just a thought that I had. They started by saying that this was spread by a man eating a bat.
Right.
But now they're saying that it was actually a snake.
Really?
Yes, that someone ate a snake and it spread through a snake. Which is interesting. I mean, that's the most recent thing that I've heard. Which is interesting because it's all these wet markets in China, it's all these animals. But I don't think anything here is an accident. Anything here is b'mikra, by an accident, by a coincidence. And it was actually the snake who, convinced mankind to eat of the fruit. And then what was at one point unified, beautiful, self-testifying truth of God was then broken down into duality and multiplicity and other powers and confusion and evil infused within us. So unity was broken down into multiplicity because of the snake. So now we've eaten a snake, and this multiplicity of all of us being so separate and so different, it's being exposed that we're all actually one body. Mankind is actually one, and we are sick. It's being clear to us. I don't think this is a new sickness. I think coronavirus has exposed and revealed an underlying truth, which is mankind, we are sick, and we need healing. And that healing is only going to come when we turn our eyes to God as all of mankind together.
Okay, so I just want to kind of close with practical solutions. I mean, I like what you said, but I'm thinking, would you go as far to say Jews right now should drop everything, come to Israel, deal with a 2-week quarantine, and stay here until things blow over? Is that sound advice?
So I know the voices I'm already hearing in my head from my friends and family. It's unrealistic. It's an unreasonable request to say such a thing. It's hard for people to make changes, especially in such dire circumstances. But you know what? Sometimes history just takes turns that we don't want. And there are certain realities, and it's difficult to make certain changes. But if I had to say, and I'm only saying this from a place of love of my fellow Jew, that the answer is yes. If you can still buy a ticket, do it. Do it. Things will work out. It may not be easy, but it is the right thing to do. Not for an abstract ideological thing, not for a theological reason, but just because this is where the difference between life and death, I believe, is that decision. And it's heartbreaking for me to say, and I know it sidelines me as a wild-eyed extremist to even think in these terms, but it's true. It's true.
So let me ask you this. Let's say there's a Jewish person in America, wants to make Aliyah, doesn't have a place to self-quarantine.
What's the question?
What does he do?
Figure out a place to self-quarantine. Figure it out. Get on it. Daven about it. Think about it. Make calls. Reach out.
Should we help try to find Jews who are looking for a place to self-quarantine and a place to go?
I think Nefesh B'Nefesh is probably a good place to go. That's what they do professionally. I don't know that I would be able to do that, especially right now.
No, I don't mean go to your house, but maybe try to, I
think going to your house is a good idea.
My wife would love it. We love high-risk coronavirus patients. But yeah, okay, figure it out.
Try your best. Just try your very best. That's really what I think the answer is as ambitious a request as that is to make. And believe me, nothing would make me happier than coming back 6 weeks from now, 2 months from now, and saying, you know what? Me being a cataclysmic thinker again, I'm a whack job, eating my hat, I was wrong. That would bring me tremendous amounts of joy.
And you can always go back.
Yeah, I don't want that. I don't want bad things,
you
God
have that
forbid,
option.
to happen.
Right.
I don't want bad things, God forbid, to happen. I want every Jew everywhere in the world to be safe and secure and happy and healthy where they are. This is not a theological thing. This is a very practical thing. So
yeah, that's a good point. All right, I think that's a really good place to end. So you heard it here. If you've been considering moving to Israel, now's the time to do it. Just do it now. And if this whole thing blows over, you can always, go back to the drawing board then.
But you probably won't want to. You probably won't want to, because one last thought. I was talking to Yishai Fleischer, who's one of my greatest rabbis, friends, heroes. He's the spokesman for the Jewish community of Hebron, and he doesn't think like I think about this at all. And he says that he's not a cataclysmic thinker, and I'm a cataclysmic thinker. And he said, Ari, think about it. How did you feel after the World Trade Center? And I was going back. I was like, yeah, I was in New York. I saw it come down, and I was like, wow, this is it. This is it. Money is not going to have any value anymore. And he's like, yeah, how did you think? And it's true. I was wrong then. But there's a saying in Texas, even a blind squirrel finds an acorn. Okay, and just because I was wrong then doesn't mean that I'm wrong right now. And it seems like this is a very different thing, a global thing, that people are reeling and confused and disoriented. Nobody knows how this is going to play out, which direction this is going to go in. And during times of tremendous disorder and confusion, the last thing a Jew wants to be is at the mercy of the Gentile world. That's not to say there aren't loads of very holy, righteous Gentiles that would protect Jews. But listen, in Germany they made movies about them. They were so rare. There was Schindler, Wallenberg, and a handful of them. And now I think America is very different. America is a good country and a lot of God-fearing, Jew-loving people, and I think America has been blessed for that reason. But I don't think on a wide-scale level, Jews in America are going to be safe with the unraveling of the societal fabric and the economic downturn that is fated to unplay before our eyes in the weeks and months ahead.
Wow, powerful words. So if you enjoyed this video and you think the message is important, please give us some feedback, give us a like, and if you know anyone who is in America or any Jew anywhere else in the world who is considering making Aliyah, please share this video with them. We think it's a very important message. Whether you agree with it or not is irrelevant. What's important is that they at least hear it and that they have the opportunity to consider it and respond to it. So thank you, and Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom.